Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. I carry one right here. All right. And you know what? It's another 1911 video. So get ready because we're talking about 1911s again. This one's here, the higher end 1911s. We got Wilson Combat, Dan Wesson, and we're going to talk a little bit about our feelings and how, you know what, are they worth it? You know, 35, four grand for some of these. Your Dan Wessons there, a couple grand a pop in some cases. Versus, you know, what are they compared to the production line, which nothing wrong with them. One of my favorite, you know, production line, $700 to $800 marker, which is not cheap, but, you know, my Springfield Armory 1911 Commander, lightweight, 9mm, some people, but, you know, from that to grips to magazines and everything. So let's get rolling and check them out because I think anytime you get a table full of 1911s, I'm glad I came to this video.
Yes, all goodness.
Right down to the old classics. Look at that. I see you got a couple of classics out there.
Having owned a number, I'll just put it that way, a number of 1911s over the course of the last 50 years, I can say that, well, with all certainty, that the higher price ones is not necessarily an issue of price. It's more of an issue of quality.
Absolutely. I think so too. I mean, they are a step above. They're your standard production, say like this Series 70 Mark IV, you know, the old classic Colt, which nothing wrong with them. They're excellent, my personal choice, but they're definitely start to get a step above when you start talking about some of the ones that we got here on the table, just some examples.
Right. Well, you know, 30 years ago or so, basically what you had is a handful of manufacturers manufacturing 1911 pistols, predominantly Colt.
Right.
And the prices were at a certain benchmark. Then over the years, prices have started to climb to where even the average, say, Series 70, Series 80 Colt are becoming rather spendy. You're looking in the $700 to $1,000 bracket, depending on which model you buy.
Yeah.
And does that move them up into the more expensive bracket? I'd have to say yes. But on the other hand, you have your customs and your semi-customs, like your Wilson. Tell us about this Wilson.
The Wilson Combat definitely commands a high price for sure, and they're going higher. And in fact, I think I was watching Bill Wilson even talk recently about a 30% increase just because of the cost of raw materials.
Right.
But that's what's going to start to happen with these guys using quality pieces and steel and stuff like that they're using to build these things. And that's where some people don't understand that where, yeah, you can get inexpensive stuff or cheaper things, but why would say like a Bill Wilson's, you know, Wilson Combat cost 4 grand? The quality of steel that they're building these things out of and not using things like machine injected, you know, castings or anything like that. This is all solid, you know, steel that they're machining these things out of, much like the gun that was built from yesteryear, such as this World War II Colt here from 1942, that where they were actually building these things and milling them out from solid steel.
Just standard ordnance steel.
Right. And that's kind of what you're getting here with like a Wilson Combat. You're not getting something that popped out of like a cupcake mold and put together. These were built and crafted by gunsmiths of the craft of profession and everything.
One of the reasons that 1911s command a hefty price like that, because they are labor intensive to actually manufacture.
Yeah.
And there's a lot more hands-on processing with a 1911 than say one of your polymer type guns that are just injected molded and assembled.
Yeah. When you go to change out things, if you're going to change parts or anything like that, this is not necessarily a gun that you're going to plug and play. There's definitely going to be fitting required. You're going to have to know a little bit about some stuff. I kind of found out by pretty much costing myself money and ruining parts. And
we've done that.
Yeah. So it definitely is. Now, you know, speaking on the on the basic line, production line of the house, that you're talking like a $700 1911, and not saying that that's cheap or inexpensive, but something like this Springfield here, where it does have MIM parts, basically castings. Like the grip safety on this is a casting.
Right.
It's a machine
But
MIM part.
So many people misunderstand when you say cheap.
Right.
In the context that we're talking about these 1911s, cheap means less expensive. It doesn't mean that they're junk. It means they're still a functional, well put together firearm.
Yeah.
And they do shoot well.
Yeah.
But the nuances that you're paying the extra money for might not be there at a level that, say, the Wilson Combat or the Dan Wessons or some of the others have out there.
Yeah.
But that's what you're paying for, is the craftsmanship and materials that go into these that are a cut above your standard, off the rack. 1911s, say, like your import 1911s, like your Thesis and several others that are out there right now.
I've got one. I think you've got a couple.
They're not, and they're great shooters. I'm not knocking them whatsoever.
But for me to say this, basically kind of a production line, if you will, even though it's one of my favorite configuration, commander size 9mm, it's not going to be on the same level as, say, that Dan Wesson Valor over there.
Nor would you expect it to be at the price point.
Yeah. I mean, the steel in that is probably, far more superior, even though, say, like this particular one, they do offer forged
it may have a few MIM parts, whatever, and it may have a casted frame or whatever, as opposed to, say, some of the higher end ones here. There are going to be all forged construction, and there's even grades of forged.
Yes.
It depends on the process, is how well that forging is going to come out, and how workable and malleable it is to actually construct something like a 1911 out of it.
Yeah.
And it takes some real skill. Even with CNC machinery, it still takes a good bit of skill to finally have one from the drawing board to the finished product. It's a lot of work to put these together.
Absolutely. I mean, and there's nothing wrong with, the more inexpensive line. Long-term use, I'm not sure like how, over the time it's going to hold up. I can tell you this, like some of these old ones here, like that one being from 1942.
Right.
I mean, it's still shootable today.
Yeah, and I'm sure it's had a lot of rounds in it.
Yeah.
But if you look closely at that particular one right there, even with as many rounds as have been fired through it, it's still quite tight. But now people misunderstand. They think that you're going to shoot a gun loose. Let me tell you something. I've shot many thousands of rounds through not only 1911s but other guns, that people assume, well, you're just going to wear it out. Well, I've lived this long and not been able to wear a 1911 out, period, whether it be one of the less expensive ones or one of the top of the line ones. Is that I don't know how many thousands and thousands of rounds it would actually take to actually get to the point that you say, this one's done, it's over.
Yeah.
The tolerances are so blown out that it's no longer shootable. Never came across that, not once.
And I was kind of, even for myself, like with this being an alloy frame, that, or whatever, lightweight, kind of aluminum type deal,
Excuse me.
I was kind of thinking, I wonder how long it would last. Like, will this thing wear out quick, overnight, or whatnot? But I can say I've got quite a lot of rounds through it, being my favorite 1911. And this, of course, was during a time where I was working at an indoor range, and I shot it pretty much daily, and got a lot of rounds through it. And it is still
Let me ask you this.
Functionable.
Let me ask you this simple question then. In the time that you've owned that firearm, and as many times as you've shot it, and as many times as you've taken it apart to clean it, have you noticed any appreciable, substantial wear to it?
Actually, no, which is a good question. I'm glad you brought that up, because I did not experience any kind of excessive wear or, impact or gouging in the aluminum or anything like that. In fact, it's ran perfectly fine, and I've ran quite some warm 9mm through it, and some others, moderate, stuff. But definitely, he's been a good shooter.
Well, that accumulated in kind of playing out my point, is that the less expensive ones that have the cast or not even the forged slides and stuff are going to probably last the average shooter longer than his lifetime. You're never going to wear one out. I don't know how many thousands of rounds it would actually take. I don't know that I would live long enough to see that. And I've been around a while, a couple of weeks anyway.
Yeah, definitely. Maybe a couple weekends.
Yeah, throw those in.
Yeah.
The ones I remember anyway.
But on the other side, you know, some of the things that I started to like about the higher end ones, which, you know, this being the Wilson Combat, was there was a lot of things that I noticed that were definitely a difference. One of them is the sensitivity testings for the grip safety here, where you're putting a light, you know, amount of pressure on the trigger, and you can actually see right there. That's all it takes before it is engaged, ready to go. And you take something like this one here we'll take, and by putting the pressure again on the trigger, I mean, this has to almost travel the entire distance before it is actually depressed. You know, of course, that's just what you're going to get with production line stuff.
But like you're saying, that is one of the nuances.
Yeah.
That a custom 1911 will allow you, is that the tolerances are tighter, they're quicker,
yeah,
and they're smoother.
And one thing too for me that has become thing is the amount of fitting, if you will, or just being smoothed out.
The blending.
The blending. When you grip the grip safety here, between the grip safety and the frame, it is just nice and bevel. Everything is beautiful.
It's like it's all one part.
Yeah, it's like it's all one part. Even to slide the frame, and you get the extra serrations on the back here, and then also the magazine well on the inside is beautifully done.
Well, same can be said for this semi-custom, which is the Dan Wesson Razorback. This one happens to be chambered in 10 millimeter. The frame to slide fit on these upper echelon guns are impressive, to say the least.
Yeah.
And having a machinist, well, master machinist background, I'm quite impressed by it. And as far as machine work goes, it takes quite a bit to get me impressed. And the Dan Wessons and the other echelon guns, like the Wilsons and whatever, they're amazing how much they can get tolerances and still make the gun work.
Yeah. And much like that one, it's very dehorned. All these edges have been taken down. The same here. You can rub your hands across it. Now, if I were to do that with, say, this gun, you can feel it. It'll catch you.
Yeah.
It'll get you.
But those are those same nuances we've been talking about.
Right.
And why you're paying that extra $1. Is that, does it make the gun more shootable? In the long run, I say yes.
Well, and we'll do a close-up of this and checking this out. Now, check out the fit on this. And you can see where it's depressed. And you can actually feel the edges of the frame on that when it's depressed there.
Now, is that going to keep the gun from being shootable? Absolutely not. But now, that is a Colt.
That is, yeah. That's the Colt Series 70 Mark IV that I'm sure many of you that have been hanging around those gun counters, gun shops have heard that guy, well, I'll take that old Colt Series 70 and all that. Great gun and all that, but really, it's still a production gun.
It is.
I mean, it's still going to have a couple of little,
Well, to keep the price point down, stuff like dehorning and smoothing up certain items and putting in the extra hand working, which is, you got to pay somebody to do that.
Yeah.
And that's just going to add to the overall cost of the firearm, is how much of that custom, and that's what we're talking about here, custom work are you going to put into it and still get your money on your sale for the thing.
Yeah, and I love the history of this gun. I love it. It's definitely one of my favorites of the government model lines.
Oh, yeah.
You certainly got to have something like that. But you can definitely feel, like on some of these other ones, I mean, you can feel the edges on that, just on that. And that's another Colt right there.
Right.
One of their World War I replica models that they got out.
Now, it is a pretty good rendition. It has all the right markings. We will
Yeah.
get a chance to show a little bit a better close-up of this here later in the video. But it meets all the criteria for somebody that wanted a collectible firearm that was era-specific,
Yeah.
and it had all the bells, whistles, and nuances that you would look for in a World War I 1911. And this has it all.
And they did a good job at that one.
Yes.
With the even with the shorter grip safety, which gives you hammer bite with that larger.
It's got the old large hammer on it. Yeah.
Which got the old large hammer, where versus they started to thin them out and shave them down a little bit to reduce the hammer
went
bite.
to the combat style hammers.
Right, with that larger grip safety, and that kind of puts a nice padding there on the web of your hand.
Right. And those developments were because customers asked for it.
Yeah.
I mean, improvements come down the road for some guns quite quickly, but the 1911 has been evolving since its inception. It really never has quit being improved upon.
Over 100 years later, and there's gunsmiths still putting in the time, and and also the accessories and things that go with it. I'm a grip guy. You're a grip guy.
Oh,
You
yeah.
love all the grips, and we have. I love the old school 50s. What do they call the phenolic resin type grips that they were putting on there?
The key style.
The key style grips that they came after the World War II stuff. When they ran out of those, Colt started producing them, some other variation of them with their little pony logo on them. Another one of my favorites would be the skip checker grips.
Right.
That was what was when did those start coming around? 80s,
I remember in
90s?
the early 80s.
Yeah.
Was when you first started seeing those show up on 1911s, and they were kind of the rave for a while.
Yeah. I mean,
And then all of a sudden
I
they just
certainly-
disappeared, and to find a pair of them,
Yeah.
say on an online site or say an eBay or such,
They can get pricey.
yeah, you're looking at $75, $80 for a pair of them.
Yeah, and I'm an ivory guy. Of course, this is not legit ivory as a synthetic, but I love the ivory look. And you can get them in like a nice clean ivory like that, or the aged, which is another favorite of
Antiqued
mine.
ivory,
The
yeah.
antiqued ivory style that actually does have real bone
Right.
composites in there.
Yeah, I've got several pairs of the grips that you made, and actually
Yeah.
are a bone composite.
Yeah,
It's basically a very specialized rosin and powdered bone, but the end of the process,
right.
it's just as good as a slab of bone, but there is no air pocket imperfection in it that you'd find in real bone. They're very stable and they're very strong.
Yeah. I actually started to like the Wilson grips, where they called it Starburst.
Right.
And this is, I believe, Cocobolo wood on that one with the silver medallion. You can also get some of their other more expensive ones. This is a burl wood. This is smooth with a gold-plated medallion. Now those are pretty nice too.
Yes, they are.
And they're cut for the magazine well on the bottom.
I don't know how well they can tell. Well, they probably
Yeah.
can't from here, but
Right.
the grain in the wood on those is absolutely fabulous.
Yeah. I would say also, for me at least, of course, the old school magazines were always an issue. I started to go with Wilson Combat magazines from the beginning. What about you? What were you starting to use?
Well, it's just like anything else. You evolve and you find out what works and what don't. And when you get tired of what don't work, you wind up buying Wilson Combat.
Yeah.
And
I mean, if people accuse us, oh, you must get paid by Wilson Combat. No, just like what works. I spent all my hard-earned money on it, and just to show you that,
yeah, we can pile them up there.
yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
definitely been using the Wilson magazines, and I've got all different types of them. These are actually the original Wilson and Rogers magazines, back when he did those. The only thing I've done was replace the bottom plate on it, because I think some of those got a little older on it. But these are the original 47 magazine, the 7-rounder, and then I got even the 47D, which is the 8-rounder magazine.
Right.
And
And when I can find those, that's the ones I prefer to get
yeah, the 7
my-
or the 8.
for the 1911s.
Yeah.
Well, then, then I still buy the Wilson for the 9 mils too.
Oh yeah, the 9mm magazine for the Wilson is definitely a standard
It's
for me.
just as, to me, it's just as necessary as the ones for the 45.
Yeah.
It's the quality and cut of the magazine.
Right. And the quality, and I've seen so many of the other magazines fail over time that's why I stopped. I just started I started going after the quality ones because I figure I was kept spending. It's like, yeah, okay, I'll save $20 and I'll buy this one. But then I got out of 5 of them, I had like 2 or 3 of them break.
In the long run, you're costing yourself
on the
money.
backs here with this would shear off and
Crack.
Yeah. My biggest pet peeve, honestly, with the older magazines is the foot on them, where this one's got it, magazine here, one of the old magazines. This would actually start to bend, and you can see them; they're bending out and completely coming off. I seen personally somebody had one of these with the extra little pad on it that you can screw into it or whatever. At the range, he took a corner and it actually caught the corner and just ripped the whole thing off, including that spring ammo went all over the floor.
Just the opposite. I've seen guys out there running drill with them, and actually drop these old style magazines and actually bend the tap upwards, and then she won't seat in the gun again.
Oh yeah, they run into problems there.
Now these, I've had them bounce off concrete.
Yeah.
Everything else, there's nothing there to get bent up. And actually, the heel plate, if you do damage it, it's replaceable.
Yeah, it's replaceable.
Buy a
They
whole
do
bag
sell
of
them,
them.
yeah. This is the ETM magazine. This is the other one. And then we also have, this one here is the Vickers Tactical magazine, where it's got a little bit more of a hefty base plate on it, which I believe is aluminum or metal.
It's some kind of metal, and they are spendy.
Yeah, they're spendy. These ones they cost a lot more, maybe by $10 or something, and they also have the groove lines cut into the polymer follower. Right. But
are they better than a Wilson Combat?
I think they're pretty. I mean, if to each their own. You like them. The tube is completely sealed up, except for a witness hole in the back for the 8th round, and of course the standard cutout here for the magazine catch to lock up into it. But other than that, the whole idea was to seal it up so dirt and debris doesn't get into it. But I felt that, honestly, the standard ETM magazine is just as good. It costs a little less, and you're still getting a definite quality magazine out of it versus spending the little extra. And I think some of it too is, the cool factor of Larry Vickers helping to develop this and everything.
Right.
And he's definitely a good name in the 1911 world.
Well, yeah, he's a very knowledgeable individual when it comes to 1911s. Nobody can argue that. He's written a number of books on the subject.
And he's built them too.
Oh, yes.
Anyway, we're going to close out the video here. I think we've kind of bored everybody enough with this stuff. But to give you kind of a little excerpt, we're going to go through and add this clip in of what we actually have here on the table for your viewing pleasure, a close-up.
Yeah, we'll throw in some close-ups and give you guys a real close-up bird's eye view of some of the things we've been talking about.
Yeah, what we had here on the table, so you can get a little closer look and everything. Again, not trying to trash one brand or one style of this or another.
Not what we're here for.
Yeah, it's just I definitely have grown an appreciation for these higher end stuff. I definitely like them. They're definitely a keeper in the collection, and you have got a few nice ones yourself.
Yes, and the reason I've finally graduated at this point is because they work.
They work, and
they work even under adverse conditions, where some of the other less expensive ones, you may have a bobble now and then. But, okay, let's move right on to the next part.
Okay. Going to give you guys a quick tour here of what we had on the table. Starting off here with the Dan Wesson. This one here is the 10mm. Absolutely gorgeous 1911. Again, like I Carry One had pointed out, this is a pretty much like a semi-custom production line, but still with a lot of custom features and touches done to it. Beautiful features again. Love that flat top on there. I've been pretty much a big fan of those. They've been coming out. Of course, it kind of deviates a little bit from the original, the OG, if you will, that I like, but definitely one that I definitely appreciate all the features that they've been doing. All right. Now, coming over, speaking of the old school, we've got the old school Colt reintroduction or reproduction, if you will, of the World War I pistol. And this is definitely a faithful reproduction of that gun. I think they've done an excellent job, and who better to do it than Colt themselves. Right down to all the roll marks, the rampant pony, the flat smooth mainspring housing, lanyard loop, the shorter grip safety with that wonderful hammer bite that you will experience, including the short sights, U.S. property marks and everything, and the patent dates on the slide. Excellent stuff. Speaking alongside of the war guns, World War II vintage, 1942 Colt. Beautiful, that old school greenish parkerizing that they had on these things. This gun needs no real introduction as an old school standby. That these things have gotten very expensive over the time. This is not one of the CMP models or anything. This is a field fresh, if you will, that doesn't have any other importing or modification marks from Arsenal rebuilds or anything like that. This is as is from when it was issued and everything. So that's pretty cool right there. All right. I'm going to go ahead and move on around here. I've got another Dan Wesson here that is one of my personal favorites. This is the Valor. I'm a big fan of the 9mm chambered in 1911. I know if you're a purist, you're not going to agree with that, but I have definitely been a big fan of them. This one here, the Commander model, all with the little bobtail on this, I think they call it like a V-bob. This is a really good feature for carrying and everything. And again, that grip safety when depressed is very slicked up, all smooth and everything, dehorned. Another great 1911 right there. Classic size, speaking of carry, the Colt Defender, which is pretty much their officer's model. Nice, beautiful gun, as Colt, they definitely make some really classy stuff. And of course, I love the company, love the history and everything. So they're an officer's model, which we got videos on all this stuff here on the channels, on both myself and I Carry One, so you can see it all. The Springfield Ronin, one of my personal favorites for sure. I picked this thing up because it has the best of the packages that I've heard. That was definitely a one to get, which is the Commander's variant in the lightweight alloy in 9mm. So it does have the lightweight frame, but it's got the Commander length, the barrel and slide, which is I believe 4 3/4, and it does have the chambering in 9mm again, but it's really soft to shoot. Really a fantastic gun, and you get the best of both worlds, I think, with the softer shooting, smaller size, and easier and lighter to carry, as I did when I worked at the range. I carried that pretty much every day. All right, true classic, as everybody's heard, the Colt Mark IV Series 70. Again, this is pretty much like their commercial version of the World War II gun. It's got the arch mainspring housing, which I like. I'm kind of strange that way. Their teardrop thumb safety, which I'm a big fan of. I don't really care personally. For me, I'm not a fan of the extended or wider thumb safeties there. That's just me. That's my preference. But this is the old classic, without a doubt. The billboard style stampings and everything. Sometimes they're harder to get decent stampings. Sometimes they're a little washed out. I have a video where I was talking about that a lot. But again, this is just it's one of the run-of-the-mill ones that they got out. It was heavily, a lot of these were chopped up and modified back in the 70s. This one, I believe, is like vintage 1976, 75 or so. It does have kind of, a gap in spacing between where the grip safety is depressed and everything and the frame. But that's just kind of how it is and how you get it. Still a gorgeous gun. One of my favorites as far as a classic goes. Another classic, this one here, Colt Commander 9mm. Another great setup. Love it. Blued, classic look. Just have to have one of those. All right, and last but not least, of course, the Wilson Combat the CQB, excuse me, the Elite, and the Elite just means it's got the ambi safety, which are low profile. Even though I'm a lefty, I'm not a fan of the ambidextrous safety on these. I just shoot them right-handed mostly. But this one here being low profile, it definitely is a nice touch to it. It's got a high cut up here on the frame between the trigger guard and the frame there, front strap checkering. and of course the checkering here, and the magazine well has been beautifully blended. Middle, not extremely extended, but kind of a mid extension on the magazine release, which it's kind of spoiled me on having that. Of course, the flat top serrations, everything, and all just is gorgeous, beautifully dehorned, armor tough finish, and of course the gorgeous grips and everything. But that one definitely, I get a question a lot of times, for a price tag at the time when I bought that a few, 4 years ago or whatnot, $3,500. Is it worth it? Absolutely. Do I think it's worth it? Yes, bar none. They definitely make a solid 1911, worth every dollar. So thanks for watching. Appreciate it. Thanks for hanging around the channel, and we'll see you next time.